Hi there, I'm Lori. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist who specializes in neurodiverse relationships and mixed neurotype couples. And I'm here today to talk to you about a common challenge that I often hear about from folks who are partners and spouses of autistic adults or adults who are on the autism spectrum. So if you happen to be the autistic partner, the neurodivergent partner, you can listen in on this conversation that I'm having with somebody who loves and cares about you. But if you don't want to expose yourself to this, or if it just doesn't feel helpful, I've got other content on my channel that's for folks of all neurotypes, so go check that out instead. So for you partners, there is a common challenge that people encounter that I am taking some time to address today. And it sounds something like this. I find that for partners who have taken the time to see their relationship through a neurodiversity lens and to have compassion for their partner and to understand some of the challenges that their partner experiences as a person on the autism spectrum, that once folks have kind of done that hard work, they often come to me with this challenge that's really weighing on them, where they say, okay, now what's happening is there are moments in my relationship where my partner says or does something, or maybe fails to say or do something, and I can see it completely through a neurodiversity lens. I understand what happened for them. I know intellectually that they care about me, they love me, they're invested in this relationship, and that what happened in this particular incident is just really a reflection of their neurotype and how they process the world. But emotionally, I feel upset about it. I feel sad. I feel rejected. I feel abandoned. I feel, lonely. All those different feelings can come up kind of depending on what the situation is. And, I don't want to feel that way. I don't like feeling upset about something that I know isn't my partner's fault, and where I know there's really nothing for me to do about it, or nothing that I really can do to change it or would want to do to change it. So if that sounds familiar to you, keep listening. We're going to talk about what's going on here and what are some tips for how to cope with this experience. So let's start with the what is going on here. We're actually going to start by thinking about a neurodivergent brain, and then we're going to flip the script. So, if you understand autism, neurodivergence, you've probably heard that sometimes folks who are neurodivergent have a really hard time with the sound that refrigerators make. For some folks, the sound that a refrigerator makes can be really distracting. For other folks, it's this auditory sensory experience that's just very distressing or almost painful. And for some folks, it's some of both. Whatever the case may be, for some people, the sound of the refrigerator causes some dysregulation, some distress for them, and it's challenging. So that person can absolutely understand intellectually the refrigerator is good. I need a refrigerator. It keeps my food cold. I appreciate that it does that. I wouldn't want to live without a refrigerator because I like the good foods that I can keep inside of it, right? They can have all this understanding that the fridge is good, that the fridge isn't, meaning to do anything that's distressing to them, and yet that doesn't alleviate the distress. The distress is still there because it's not about intellectually understanding. It's about something that's happening kind of at a nervous system level, at a deeper level that's not really within that person's control. So if we flip the script, the same thing can happen to you if you're allistic or neurotypical, right? And it might be under different circumstances, but any of us, no matter our neurotype, are capable of experiencing nervous system dysregulation and distress that doesn't make sense to us intellectually. This is just part of being human. I think, unfortunately, we've received a lot of messages of sort of like mind over matter, that we can kind of think our way out of our feelings. And, the more that psychology evolves, the more I think we're coming to appreciate and accept that feelings are hardwired into our humanity, and our intellectual understanding, insight, awareness doesn't always shift or shift immediately what we're feeling emotionally. So we can all have these experiences where there's a contradiction. There's something that we understand in our minds, and then there's something else that we're feeling emotionally. And so that's what's happening to you in these moments where you're feeling like you understand what happened, you can see it through a neurodiversity lens, and yet it hurts, it's upsetting in some way. So first of all, give yourself credit that actually means you're doing some really hard work. You've developed self-awareness to recognize your feelings. You've developed awareness of neurodiversity that allows you to have this intellectual understanding, and it's really an advanced skill to hold two things at the same time and to let them both be true. So now that we understand a little bit about what's happening, let's also talk about kind of our reaction to what happens and something that we want to try to do less of. So a really common reaction to this is self-blame. And that's an adaptive form of coping for some different reasons. It might bring us a little bit of relief if we can blame ourselves, then that kind of lets us out of this contradiction, at least temporarily. But that self-blame ultimately doesn't serve us well because this contradiction just is, and it's going to happen again, and it's not going to just go away. So we want to kind of try to catch our self-blame in our response to what's happening and try to let go of that. Another thing that can happen along with self-blame can be this, real suppression of what we're feeling. Like, oop, don't like that I'm feeling that. Let me just distract myself, shove that down, go do something else, take my mind off of it. Really trying to talk ourselves out of having the feeling. And that also doesn't work because what we have to work hard to suppress often kind of gets bigger. So you might be able to do that for one interaction, or let's say even 10 interactions. But then maybe by interaction number 11, you're going to have this emotional stew that's been simmering unattended. And that's when folks tend to end up just sort of exploding. And that can often come out at your partner in a way that's not kind or compassionate, that can be pretty dysregulated and can leave both of you kind of spinning in the aftermath of that. Plus, it just doesn't feel good to you to have that little simmering stew, whether it erupts in a way that disrupts the relationship or not. So we don't want to self-blame, and we don't want to just shove it aside. So what we can do instead of those two temptations is we can learn to practice self-compassion. And self-compassion is a skill that allows us to notice what we're feeling, to turn towards ourselves, to offer ourselves some comfort and some kindness, and to let the feeling be accepted and responded to in a loving way that puts us in good relationship with ourselves. So self-compassion takes time to learn. It's a more involved skill than I can elaborate on fully in this video. Please take a look at, I've got a self-compassion library. I also have a course where I teach partners about the practice of self-compassion. So you can take a look at those links and those resources if you want to learn a little bit more about what it looks like to practice self-compassion. So that's kind of our first tip, is to practice self-compassion, to acknowledge our pain and to turn toward ourselves in that pain and respond to ourselves with some kindness. That's the first thing that we can do. Another thing that we can do is not an in the moment thing, it's an around the moment thing. And that's being really intentional and proactive with your self-care. When we're already running on empty, relationally, emotionally, physically, and an incident like what I just described occurs and our nervous systems are getting dysregulated, we are going to have a really hard time working our way through that when we're already under-resourced. We're going to be a lot more likely to really lose our cool, either with our partner or, go to those places of really self-blame or other ways of coping that may not be healthy or helpful for us. So it can be hard to do. I'm saying this like it's simple, but it's really important to try to take some inventory of your life and to look at where can you take something off your plate, Where can you add in a healthy or supportive behavior or a source of support for yourself that can keep your tank as full as possible, so that you've got a cushion and you've got a little bit of wiggle room to maneuver through these hard times, because they just are an inevitable part of these relationships. It's going to happen, and you need to be prepared and in a good place when it does. So that can look like, having regular time with a friend, having time with a therapist, being a part of a support group. It can look like making sure you drink enough water every day, that you eat foods that feel nourishing to your body, that you aim to get a good night of sleep, that you take care of health issues that come up for you, that you take medication if that's something that benefits you in terms of your regulation and your mental health, right? There's a lot of different buckets of possibility, but that gives you kind of a sense of the type of proactive, consistent self-care that I'm talking about here. Last but not least, the third thing that you can do is you can have a conversation with your partner about this experience that you have. I don't recommend trying to do that in the moment. That's like, I don't know, trying to pat your head and your tummy at the same time, right? It's just too much to kind of coordinate all at once. But when you have a calm moment, when you're on the other side of what's occurred, finding a quiet and focused time where you can try to describe to your partner this overall experience, maybe even give the specific example, and just be clear with them that you see them, you see their love and care, you see the way they process the world, and you really understand fully that they in no way intend to upset you or hurt you, but that your body doesn't necessarily know the difference. Your nervous system doesn't necessarily know the difference. So you have this reaction, and it's a hard thing to have both these things going on internally at the same time. And it's something that you're working on, and you're willing to continue to navigate it because you love them and you care about them, and there's so many good qualities in your relationship. But that this is a hardship that you have, and it's something that is challenging for you at times. You can even share this video if that's a helpful entry point to being able to have this conversation. And I know it can be delicate to bring this up. I think partners often feel really protective about the other person's feelings, and not wanting them to feel in any way criticized or put upon with this information. But I just want to reassure you that what I see when my couples have conversations like this is that everyone just kind of exhales. There's something about being able to name this that I think ends up feeling really freeing to everybody. And this can do a lot to help you in those moments moving forward, right? When there's some sense of like, oh, this is just part of it. And my partner gets that at some level, and they care about me, and they appreciate that I am working on navigating this struggle. I think that can just go a long ways to, again, providing you with somewhat of a cushion, a buffer to get through these moments when they occur. Now, if you're somebody whose partner isn't interested in using a neurodiversity lens to look at your relationship, or hasn't identified or been diagnosed with autism, you can't have this conversation, right? I mean, you can maybe attempt some version of it, but I think it's really hard to have this conversation in a meaningful way without being able to talk about neurotype and processing differences. So if that's the situation you're in, I just want you to be able to acknowledge to yourself, you're probably going to struggle a little bit more with this. You're going to have this happen maybe with more frequency, or maybe when it does happen, it's going to feel that much more distressing, and that might not feel like a lot of comfort now, but I hope it's something that can help you at least reduce that self-blame, guilt, push the feeling away kind of thing. If you have some awareness that like, ooh, it makes sense that I struggle with this. Remember, this is a context where this is particularly likely to happen. I think that can go a long ways to helping you accept yourself and be kind to yourself and support yourself through that experience. So just a quick little recap. This happens because we can understand something intellectually and have a contradictory feeling at the same time. That's part of the human experience. the things we want to try not to do is blame ourselves or suppress what we're feeling and shove it aside. And some things we can do instead include practicing self-compassion, like being with that feeling, accepting it, and turning towards ourselves with some kindness and acceptance of who we are and what we're moving through. We can also provide ourselves with proactive, good, consistent self-care to the best of our ability. And we can have conversations with our loved one that makes us feel a little bit less alone in carrying this experience and working through it. So I hope this video is helpful to you, and you can find more about me and about the support that I offer to folks on my website. Best wishes to you in your journey in your mixed neurotype relationship.